Good morning, everybody. Well, at least it's morning for me. I know you can't tell. I'm stuck in my office. The only window I have is my door, and I can actually see one window. So that's nice. It's the little things. The little things. Anyway, let's get back into it. Um, we're gonna finish up this lab, or at least the next step, and discuss how we can edit this block in terms of cutting sections out. We already know how to add material through extrude or pipe, things like that, that are um, pretty straightforward at this point. So we're going to discuss, how can we cut material away, and we're going to start with this here arc that's cutting out of this section of the block, and we see that we just have these two dimensions defining essentially what is the center point. Sometimes it's hard to see, but just based off of the fact that there are just these three dimensions here, they're probably related. So we can go ahead and make that assumption, and if it doesn't look right, then we know something's up. So let me just move this so I can actually see it. I'm just going to rotate it 90. So when I'm looking at the front view, there it is. I'll move it up out of the way. Where are you, part? There we go. All right. I'll move it over to... So, again, I hope you kind of realize how every time we're adding a new part or component, we're always going to try to reference something else in here. And that's important just so that it's all nice and precise. And also in doing that practice, even if you're not working with precision parts, it's always good to do that so that every part you make references a part you made before. And that just makes a much cleaner part. And please, if there's anything you learn from this, it is that when you start making something, please always reference what you've been working on. That way you know exactly where a specific line comes from, a specific curve, and it's just helpful. Because if you don't, sometimes things can get crazy. And I see that all the time where parts don't necessarily work because there's just a fine difference between what you might make and what the model or the geometry associated with a different part is. There's a difference. And I'm just put a circle right here on this corner, but we'll discuss a different way of making this curve. Say, what if the curve is not a uniform arc, and just some pitfalls to remember not to do. So I'm just going to move this guy over. No, I'm going to move it 0.73. Oh, you know what I did there? Negative 0.73, because I'm referencing this point. No, we'll go up 3.28. Boom. Boom. And that looks kind of about right. This part might be a little deceiving. It may kind of like intersect that point or that edge, but it doesn't necessarily look like it has to. So what we can do next, I'm going to go into perspective mode so we can see what's going on. So right now I've got this big circle here, and I want to cut it. One thing I could do is I could potentially just go up to solid, extrude planar curve, straight. And again, you see it's only letting me extrude one way, but I can come up and do, it's not letting me do both sides. There we go, both sides, right up here. I could do this method in which I select it, and then I want to do a Boolean difference right here. It's under solid, Boolean difference, and that way it's going to allow me to essentially subtract this region from this region. And what I mean region, I mean this whole volume. So I'm going to go to solid, difference, select surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract from, which is this guy. I want to subtract from this. And then select to subtract with, which is this guy. And then we've got that. So I just instantly cut it out, and it also automatically deleted that section. Now, you can also tell it to not delete the input, which your input for this section would be that cylinder. In that way, it can stay if you want to keep it. Now that is sort of kind of a long way around it. Now that might be necessary if your geometry is kind of a little more three-dimensional. And what I mean is that maybe it's more complicated geometry than just a line. Here's a real simple thing. If you're going to just cut with lines, easy thing to do is you can just do a wire cut. And just for this example, I'm just going to split this curve randomly just so I can show you. This is a closed curve. So when you wire cut something, why don't we go through both? Why not? We got the time, right? So I'm going to select my cutting curve, and then I'm going to select this object, hit enter. And I've got both sides selected already. And so I can come out and it's going to say, is this what you want to cut? I could potentially invert it all, which means I only get a little slice. But that's what I want to do. And so it's a lot quicker. You don't have to go through so many steps. Now I'm just going to show you an example of wire cut with a open curve. And I'm just going to trim this off. So that arc is now open, but it's still enough. It's going to give us enough of a curve that we can still cut. So I'm going to come to wire cut. And with an open curve, the biggest difference is it's going to ask you both directions. So it's going to ask me one direction, and then it can ask me what the other direction is. Like, do I want to cut down? Do I want to cut up? And it's asking that because it needs to know essentially a volume, almost like the Boolean difference. It's going to ask you what else do I need to essentially subtract this from? And then it's going to ask me, and I'm going to say, great, enter, perfect. And I'm going to delete this curve here because I don't really need it. Now the second part we're going to work on is actually this little cube right here, which we see is from this point over to this point. But let's just start with, sorry, not cube, rectangle or rectangular solid. Anyway, we know it is, oh, look at that. I think we're missing another dimension. I think the dimensions are getting hidden. Something I need to work on. But I will come back with that dimension. Just reference that right now. I've got the master schematics here. Interesting. Definitely did not do that. Anywho, easy fix. Point 0.5. Oh, look at you hanging out there. Alrighty, so I'm just going to go over that quick method of generating. Go back to my standard tab up here. I put my Mac in PC mode, so I've got these nice handy tabs up here. So we know that this dimension is 0.5 and this is 0.75. what I can do is I can come up here and I can just make a box. And I can do corner, corner, height, which is a perfect way to make this. And this is the extrusions that we were talking about. Not a poly surface, but like a extruded surface, or it's just an extrusion that is a simplification of geometry. But we're just going to go with it for right now. And I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to just start with this corner because it's an easy corner, and it's going to ask me length of the box, which is length is typically x direction, which we know it's 0.5, and then the width is 0.75, perfect. And the height, it's just going to cut all the way through, so we can just extrude this really up all the way, or we can go all the way to the surface, but it's just easier to sometimes go above it. And so I'm going to go above it. Now, if you only had to go a little bit ways up, you would only go up so far, as far as you needed to go. So, sorry, it's the morning, so I'm going to go this way. And now I'm going to move it into place, which I'm just going to go back to my top view. I'm going to rotate this back down so I can see. Top view, and there we go. I'm going to move it, and it's asking me to move it. Now I'm just going to actually, I'm going to turn my perspective mode on. Oops, I'm sorry, turn all four corners on because I'm trying to, when I select here, I don't know which intersection I'm getting. So I just want to make sure I'm going to get that one. And I'm going to move it 0.75. I'm not using gumball here because gumball moves from the centroid of the object, and I want to move from that corner. So now I'm at this corner, which is a good starting point because I can then move over and then up. Pretty easy dimensions. You're probably thinking like, we've been moving so many things. This is so boring. When can we make the fun stuff? And look at that. And it's good to do this just so that we really get familiar with a easy process of making. Because once we really understand how we can manipulate the fundamentals of geometry, then we can make more precise parts, and it's going to help later on down the road when we really want to make some interesting, crazy stuff, which we will most certainly be doing. And so I've moved my block in the right spot, and because I've got that block, I can just come back and do that Boolean difference that I was talking about right here. It's called difference here, but the command is Boolean difference. And I'm going to select this guy. And, oh, I didn't delete the input, which is quite all right. Oops, don't want to move you just yet. And so I've got my little hole right there. Now, the last thing that I have here is this weird oval thing. And it looks rather circular. Generally, there's going to be cutoff views in which you can kind of see what this shape looks like, and this is some dimension associated with it because I know that here it is, this is where there's this indentation or something, and it's telling me a depth going into this block somewhere. So we'll start with just drawing this oval, and it looks like I'm getting the exterior, the major axes dimensions of this oval. So 0.888 one way, 0.5 the other way, and then it's relatively centered in this whole thing. So what I can do is, if I know that this is centered And one way we can check is I can analyze distance. And I'm going to do midpoint because if it's the center, so I'm going to go from this to here, which is 0.625, which is 1.63. So again, remember, we don't really have that many significant figures, so Rhino automatically rounded up. And we can kind of check the same thing. And 0.76. Now, oh, it's a 1. Midpoint 1. Perfect. I don't know what I was snapping to down here, but that's good because we know it's in the center. And what we want to do next is we're going to kind of extrapolate the boundary curve from this surface. And an easy way to do that is we can come up here to curve from objects, duplicate face border. And I'm going to select this face. Now the reason I'm doing that is because it's just easy to then do a center snap to this oval. This piece is floating in space. It's not really associated with anything. We could make an oval and move it, or this is another kind of quick way to do it. If this surface was in a different orientation, it might be a little harder to do that snap and then rotate it into place. We'll talk about some of those other options to do that, but right now we're going to keep it kind of basic. I think in the next few classes, we're going to talk about how we can change where our coordinate planes are. And I'll show you that after I do this oval. So let's just go into our left view because that's what we're looking into. Alrighty, and I'm gonna just select oval, and I'm gonna turn my center snap on and center, and I think it was 0.88. Nope, definitely not 0.88. I'm gonna look in my top view. Oh, it is 0.88. Let's go back. That doesn't seem right. Oh, that seems right now. And the reason why is because I wasn't holding shift. And then the next number is, go back to top view, 0.5, pretty straightforward, 0.5. Perfect. And it's going to hit, click up here to make that oval. And let's see here. There isn't a good perspective view. That's funny. I'm just going to bring that down to there isn't a good perspective view right here. Sometimes if there's like important details like that, you might see perspective view. You definitely see a wireframe view to kind of show what it is. And that's okay. Now we don't have it because really what we can do is we can just put a simple pipe on there because we know that the depth is 0.06 and it looks relatively even. However, we don't know for sure what the cross section of this cut might be like. But for right now, we can just surmise that it's going to be an easy kind of object because I want to keep this project easy this week. And we're going to do diameter. It's 0.06, right? Because that 0.06 is the depth that we're cutting into it. And if we did anything bigger, it might cut out of it, or it might not be in the right right. It just might not be the right size. Anyway, I'm going to hit enter, and then again I can do my solid difference. And there we go. We've got this nice. Again, I didn't delete input, and there we go. We've got this nice object here. Okay, so that is pretty much the basics of saying if you want to cut away material and couple of different ways of doing it. So that's it for this video. The next video, I'm just going to briefly talk about how we can annotate this and put some dimensions down just like we're doing here. And I'll see you in the next video.